welcome to this meeting of the Randwick Local Planning Panel, time being 1 minute after 1 p.m. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands we occupy for this meeting, the Aboriginal people, their spirits and ancestors. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The meeting today is to consider one general report dealing with a planning proposal and the determination of 3 development applications. Panel members for these matters are myself, Lindsay Fletcher as the independent chair, Jason Perica and Helen Lockhead as the independent expert members, and our community member is Mia Margaret Chow. The meeting is being held, as you appreciate, by video conference due to the COVID-19 precautions. As the panel chair, I request that you be considerate and respectful of each other and remain on mute until I ask you to speak. I also request that you don't interject while another person is speaking. Otherwise, I'll request that you no longer take part in the meeting. The panel operates in terms of a code of conduct and operating guidelines, which have been modified to facilitate the effective functioning of this panel. The details of those are available on the council website. The public meeting will be recorded and will be placed on the council's website following the meeting. If that's of concern to you on privacy grounds, then I suggest you take it into consideration in your decision to make a public statement before the panel today. In terms of the code, general declarations of interest have been provided before the meeting by all panel members, as well as a specific declaration of interest in relation to the matters being considered today. I can confirm that all declarations of interest have been received. Jason Perica has declared a non-pecuniary, reasonably perceived conflict of interest in relation to item 4, because an objector, who is a personal friend of his brother, made a written submission on that item. Accordingly, Jason will not attend or participate in discussions or deliberations on that item. No other members of the panel have declared a conflict of interest on any item for consideration today. The signed declarations will also be available to view through the council's website by tomorrow afternoon. I also have to advise that all members of the public addressing the panel today must declare prior to commencing their address any political contributions or donations exceeding $1,000 made over the past 2 years to any political party or candidate who contested the last ordinary election of the council. Our usual practice is to allow each speaker 3 minutes to present, including speakers representing community groups, individuals and the applicant. If you've registered to speak, your address to the panel will be recorded. You'll be given a sound warning 30 seconds or so before your time limit, and I have a limited discretion to allow extra time if appropriate. We'll hear first from members of the public, normally councillors, but there is no councillors registered to speak, followed by members of the public, and then from the applicant in relation to each development application. The panel's been provided with a copy of all the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the development applications. Therefore, there's no need for speakers to repeat the points made in those submissions. Again, I ask that each speaker be heard in silence while they're addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect be observed throughout. Panel members may ask questions of speakers to clarify understanding of the points they are making. And after hearing from all speakers, the panel will adjourn to debate the matters and make its determinations. If more information is required by the panel, the decisions may be deferred, either for a further public meeting or to be dealt with electronically. The decisions and recording will be made available on the council's website as soon as possible, usually the following day. There is to be no recording of this meeting other than the official recording. So we'll move on to the public presentations. The first item on today's public agenda is the planning proposal by Randwick City Council for the Randwick Junction Town Centre. The panel's role is only to provide advice to council on this item, not to determine the matter. We have one person registered to address the panel on this item. That's Mr. Brian Jarvie. Mr. Jarvie, again, can I ask you to please say your name for the benefit of the recording and to indicate whether or not you've made any relevant political So, Mr. Jarvie, please proceed. Mr. Jarvie there, he was earlier. Do we know if Mr. Jarvie is here or not?
I think he is, but he's on mute.
So, Mr. Jarvie, I think you're on mute. Can you unmute your microphone and proceed with your presentation? We do have the material that you forwarded to Council the last few days, so we're aware of the concern that you're raising. Technicians working on the problem. Mr. Jarvie, can you hear us?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Is that Mr. Jarvie?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mr. Jarvie. So please proceed.
Sorry about that delay. Can I just say that I've made no political donations? And I'd like to thank the members of the panel for allowing me to speak in relation to the zoning of 60 High Street, Randwick. And I hope that you've had an opportunity to see the photographs I provided with my submission when I registered to speak for this meeting. My wife and I purchased 60 High Street in 1984. Many years earlier, the house had been modernised by replacing the slate roof with terracotta tiles, and the chimneys had been removed. When we applied to Randwick Council for approval to use the house as a medical practice, Council informed us that approval would be granted if parking was provided on the site. Unfortunately, the only means of providing parking was to demolish a significant section of the house. This involved the demolition of approximately 30% of the right-hand side of the facade and demolition of the entire side veranda and a significant portion of the main room in the house, which had very nice French doors. In addition, it was necessary to remove the entire decorative east-facing gable. This demolition work resulted in the remainder of the house looking lopsided, and we received many comments from people about the changed appearance of the house. However, we have thoroughly enjoyed working in the house over the past 40 years. In recent years, we've been aware that Council proposed that 60 High Street, Randwick was to be included in the planning for the Randwick Junction Town Centre. The proposal was to allow the property to be demolished and replaced with a building 8 stories high. This would be consistent with the height level of the buildings on the right and left-hand side of 60 High Street, as High Street was listed as one of the 3 key streets in the Randwick Junction Town Centre plan. We were therefore amazed when a person who attended Randwick Council meeting on the 23rd of May 2023 notified us that Council had passed a motion that had 2 conflicting proposals regarding the future zoning of 60 High Street. One proposal was that the house should be retained with the current low-rise zoning due to the significant characteristics and detailing of the house. The second proposal that passed in the same motion was that the facade of the house should be retained and the remainder of the house should be demolished to accommodate a 28.5 to 34.5 metre high development. In view of the major alterations to the building that have significantly altered the facade of the original building, the deterioration of the building due to both its age and vibrations from the construction and operation of the light rail, we strongly consider that no part of the building should be retained and that the zoning of 60 High Street, Randwick, should be in keeping with the surrounding of the High Street block bounded by Belmore Road and Clara Street. Furthermore, the requirement to retain the house or only the facade will result in the building being dwarfed on both sides by 8-storey developments, and this will be inconsistent, or there would be an inconsistent wall height along High Street. This would be to the detriment of the overall planning strategy and be counterproductive to good urban design principles. Finally, we've lived in a number of old houses circa 1900 during our lifetime, and we recognise and greatly appreciate the significance of old buildings in their original condition. However, due to the extensive alterations to 60 High Street, it is no longer a period house of any significance. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvie. And I might just say that the panel had the opportunity to inspect the property from the street earlier today, so we're well aware of the circumstances. Do panel members have any questions? And do panel members have any questions for council staff at this stage on that matter? No. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jarvie. We'll take on board the matters you've said, the matters you've raised. And as I say, our role on this one is not to determine the matter at all. It's to provide advice to the council, but we hear what you're saying and we'll take it into consideration.
Certainly, and thank you for listening to me.
The panel will now consider the development applications, and the first of those is 26 Arden Street and 69 Varna Street, Clone Valley. The assessment report recommends that the panel conditionally approve the application. And we have 4 people registered to address the panel on the item. I've allowed 2 additional speakers, 1 for and 1 against in this matter. So the first speaker is Mr. David James, who speaks, I believe, on behalf of the Varna Street Action Group. Mr. James, are you there?
Yep, just coming off mic. Can you hear me?
We can. So
okay.
Again, if you can simply say your name and whether you've made any political donations.
David James, no political donations. And as you've already pointed out, yes, I speak on behalf of the Arden Street Action Group, who've asked me to talk on the collective behalf. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Can I share my screen, please?
I don't know whether that's possible, but yes, it is.
Yep. Okay, so we've got several objections, and the main one can be summed up in the expansion of this development means a significant expansion of the commercial use on the site. There are 2 76 square metre commercial spaces, and this will allow a very large expansion of the already commercial activities that happen in our neighbourhood. Each one of these new spaces can house simultaneous events up to approximately 70 people in each space, and this is in addition to anything that could be going on in the main hall. The proposed development is across 3 floors and it is serviced by lifts, double stairways, disabled toilets, and these are all requirements of future compliance with commercial activities such as seminars and conferences. In fact, the picture here is from the church's own architects, and you can clearly see that it's set up for a conference with the conference chairs in the background there. And I don't think, once approved, there is actually no way of the council or anyone else actually monitoring whether there are multiple gatherings or events going on concurrently or not. The main objection which stems from that is the safety issues which is already existent in our neighbourhood, and has been for many, many years, is the traffic, parking and safety issues caused by the existing commercial activities that happen in the hall. And what I'd like to do is just play this for people who haven't been on our street. Then I'd just like to play this video. This is at 5 o'clock on a Thursday. And as you can see, there's double parked cars there. There's people parking across driveways. There's a lot of activity, and this is going on 7 days a week. Another double parked car, and increasing the commercial activity can only result in another one right in the corner of Carlton Street there. The increase in commercial activity, there is absolutely no undeniable that it will bring more traffic problems. And more concerning to us is that the traffic impact assessment doesn't even acknowledge the current well-known and the traffic and parking and safety issues that we have in the neighbourhood, and we've had for years. And they've done a traffic impact assessment which counted the number of free parking spaces at 9:30 on a Thursday morning, which is probably the quietest time of the day and the week to do that assessment. So in summary, we don't understand as a group and as a neighbourhood, and we have got a good community around here, why such a big commercial development is required. You can clearly see again from the architect's own drawings here that the size and bulk just clearly is not in keeping with the neighbourhood environment that we have here, and we don't understand why the hall can't be upgraded. We understand that the church wants to add disabled access so people in wheelchairs can get into the church. We understand that. We also understand the desire of the church to upgrade the current facilities because it's an old hall. But we believe this could clearly be achieved by staying within the existing footprint. And if they need to excavate below and put the lifts down there, that's fine. But having 3 76, nearly 80 square metre gathering places just runs in the face of the church sort of ongoing commitment that they don't want to, or assertion that they don't want to run, simultaneous commercial activities. Well, if there aren't going to be any simultaneous commercial activities, why are there 3 commercial activity spaces being built plus the existing church hall? So we would like the panel to consider this and see why the development can't be done with the excavation below and just a renovation of the existing hall, and no need to go to the second story whatsoever.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. James.
Thank
I'll
you.
ask to wrap up there. Do panel members have any questions, Mr. James? No, thank you. Do you have any questions of council officers at this stage? We'll hear from the next speaker, Mr. Henry Lecow, was it?
LeCue.
Thank you.
You can hear me then?
Not muted.
Yes, we can. Thank you. Please proceed.
Great. I support David's submission. As I say, my name is Henry LeCue. I live at 32 Arden Street. I want to talk to some of the misleading representations and errors in the statement of environmental effects. In particular, the assertion that there is no impact on the adjoining neighbours. There is only an 8% increase in the floor space ratio, and there is no increase in the capacity of the church. I'll just share with you one moment. Share screen. Sorry, I'm having trouble sharing the screen. One moment. Sorry. Okay. So
Stick on it. Click on that. Can I see it?
Can that? Can you see that?
No, it's not coming through at this stage.
You can't see it, no?
Click on that.
Emily, you need to, in the top right next to the leave button, there's an arrow saying share.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's now happening.
No. I
No.
wonder if you can proceed without sharing the screen. I appreciate that may be difficult, but we do need to move on.
What, sorry, one of my,
Nothing at this end blocking.
is that now being shared?
No.
Right. All right, I will continue without it. The statement of environmental effects states that the proposed development does not result in any significant adverse impact to the amenity of the adjoining land. This is why I need to share it. At the back of firstly, the statement of environmental effects doesn't include 32 Arden Street in the adjoining blocks, and we most definitely do adjoin the property. At the back of our property, we've got an 8.5 metre brick wall on the boundary. This has already caused a significant overshadowing, as you can imagine, and we don't get a lot of afternoon sun. If they increase the height of the front of the property, that will immediately cause increased overshadowing. So what I'm saying is that we've already got a lot of overshadowing from the large hall, and the increase in the height of Barner Street will increase the amount of overshadowing. Also, the calculations in the statement of environmental effect, they talk about an 8% increase in floor space. This has come about because in the first case, they're including the basement floor space ratio, but then in the proposed floor space ratio, it's not included. So this is a bit misleading. I think in simple terms, it's easy to understand that adding an extra floor on Barner Street, which adds another 80 square metres of usable floor space, obviously increases it a little bit more than 8%. In fact, if you add up the basement and the lobby and the top, which will all be fairly usable, there's quite a significant increase in the floor space ratio, not 8%. The last point I'd like to make goes to the capacity. The statement states the proposal does not seek to increase the existing capacity of the church. First floor seeks to upgrade existing church office facilities and will not result in subsequent increase of employment by the church. This is not the case. The first floor creates a new meeting room with a capacity for 70 people, and importantly can be used at the same time as the hall. The hall currently is used 7 days a week, and there is little doubt why the church wants an additional meeting place. Clearly, adding 82 music to a second floor will increase the capacity of the site. Upgrading the and reconfiguring the ground floor and basement achieves the outcome of the church requires, which is accessible amenities and wheelchair access without the need for a first floor addition. So in summary, the council concedes that the existing building form already exceeds the floor space ratio. Any additional height of the existing building impacts the adjoining neighbours in both overshadowing and overcrowding. Increasing the capacity of the church has an impact on the already chronic parking conditions in the area. And lastly, I'd like to add that the modern design and the bulk of the proposed second floor addition changes the feel of the low density residential zoned area and is not in keeping with the heritage of the building. I ask you please to vote no to this development and ask that they remove the proposed second floor addition.
Thank you, Mr. Koo. Panel members, any questions at this stage? No, it seems not. So thank you for your address, and we'll take that on board in our consideration.
Thank you very much.
Now move to there's two speakers, or the applicant and a speaker in favour of the development. The first of those is the Reverend Dave Rogers. Are you there?
Yes, hello. My name is the Reverend David Rogers, the Senior Minister of St Luke's Church at Clovelly. I've not made any political donations. Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel. St Luke's has been part of this community since 1890, with the church building constructed in 1923 and the current hall in the 1960s. We're a church. We're here to serve our local community. Spiritual direction, community meals, a church play group, a church youth group, community events like the street party that we run at Christmas in partnership with Randwick Council. And since the 1920s, the church has shared our space with scouts, plays, seniors exercise class, election days, toddler ballet. Our current church sign says a home for everyone, but unfortunately that's not quite true. Currently, both of our buildings discriminate against those with a disability and those who are elderly. They're unsafe for parents with prams, and they don't meet the contemporary expectations that allow us to provide for the needs of our community. For the first time in a generation, St Luke's has been able to consider this project. One of the old ladies got teary. A project that would provide equitable access and toilets, that would connect the buildings, that will improve safety and noise, and update a 60-year-old building. The design creates a foyer to accommodate 2 separate ramps that are required. That effectively makes the hall space smaller than it currently is and sacrifices the current church staff office to do that. Accessible toilets and a shared church office or meeting room for the church are accommodated on a modest first floor. The proposal doesn't intensify the building. It doesn't particularly increase the size or number of people on the site. It's intended to support our existing community groups better. We understand that the main concern of the community is related to the existing operation of a dance school. That was the commercial activity referred to by Mr. James. And rather than the upgrades to support the church. We're happy to accept the condition that council has imposed that would require further development consent for a use such as the dance school to occur in future. If I can reiterate, we are a church and not a commercial operation. We have not asked for consent for a function or a conference centre. The condition imposed by council will prevent any commercial operation from occurring. St Luke's is ready to bear the cost of making these buildings accessible, and we'd like to do it in our time rather than defer the problem to the next generation. It's our church members here at St Luke's who are ready to fund this project, and so far 102 adults and 17 children and teenagers have pledged over $1.3 million so that we would bear the cost of making these buildings accessible for everyone. We did provide some comment to council in relation to the draft conditions, which we understand have been passed on to the panel. We're unclear at this stage about which aspects of those conditions that council supports, and we'd like to avoid any further unnecessary modifications if possible, and would be happy to discuss those requests further if possible for the panel. In particular, we've had detailed discussions with council's engineer in the last 2 days regarding the flooding conditions. We understand there was an error in council's assessment, and we believe that the alternative condition that we put forward is satisfactory to council's engineer. We're happy to respond to other questions that have been raised, and we just ask for your generous consideration of the proposal and its conditions.
Thank you, Reverend. I see you've got a group of people with you. I take it that would include the architect, traffic engineer, or wondering who the panel is with you before we ask questions.
That's correct. There's some people here who may well be able to answer some of the questions raised.
Okay, so panel members, any questions? Jason?
Yeah, hi. Look, I don't think in any of the submissions there's any dispute about the benefit of providing the equitable access. I guess it's the uses of the other spaces and their degree and potential impact. Can I ask you about the basement, because it is shown as not included as floor space? So and I couldn't see the nominated use of that on the plan. So what is the intended use of that basement?
That's storage. So the crypt is used as storage space.
The existing crypt.
Yeah, the existing crypt. So the existing crypt has external access stairs, which would now be internalised and continue to use as storage.
Right, so that's not open to whatever, whether it's gatherings or meetings or so on, it's just storage.
And it's an existing space.
Sorry,
But not to be used for gatherings and meeting spaces.
That's correct.
Right, okay, thanks.
sorry, could the person that answered that question just give us their name and role for the record?
John McLennan, architect.
Thanks, John. Any further questions? Helen?
Yeah, I just would also reiterate the, it's, you know, the merit of providing accessibility for all in this application. However, some of the concerns raised by objectors include the height and bulk and architectural expression, especially in relation to the heritage item. And I just was wanting to ask the architect, and the implications are included overshadowing as well as the appearance of it. So can the architect please sort of suggest the floor to ceiling heights, where there is any ability to reduce the floor to ceiling heights, whether in fact there's ability to reduce the roof plane. It is kind of a fairly strong architectural expression in relation to the heritage item rather than being recessive. The existing building is actually like one single story on the street, and the two-story part is set back, whereas this actually brings it quite forward. So what sort of ability have you got to actually reduce the bulk scale and modify the architectural expression to be a little bit more?
So a couple of matters. We have stuck within the building height limits by a considerable margin. The floor to floor level is 3.2 metres, but if you include structure, it's actually 2.7. 2.7 metres is an appropriate height for a public space of that scale. And it would not be advisable to reduce it any further. Additionally, we have consulted with MBRS heritage architects. I'm also a heritage architect myself, and have come to an agreement. We made some adjustments to the design, which is included in the DA submission, and there is a respectful contrast between the new and the old in accordance with the Borough Charter. Furthermore, we have consulted with the Anglican Diocese Architectural Panel with two additional peer review architects in terms of the expression. There is a large parapet that already exists. So the portion of the building, which is 2 stories, that's in front of that parapet is quite modest. And the setback of the new build is actually further away from the street than the original building that's there now, the original hall. And that is to respect the heritage nature of the church structure itself.
Michael Rowe here from Ethos Urban. And I just thought just to add to John's comments, just some additional detail. So the proposal is 8 metres high in a 9.5 metre height limit zone. So you could feasibly have a house that is actually taller than the proposal that's before you today. It was raised about elements such as overshadowing. I think council's assessment is actually very clear about how we're still complying with council's DCP. The gentleman that objected from 32 Arden Street, there is no additional shadow on 32 Arden. So whilst it shows at the back there, the new addition doesn't actually overshadow his property that's existing shadow cast by the existing building. So, you know, in its context, the impacts are very modest. There is a further condition from the council's heritage architect about the
Finishes.
well, yeah, that and the overhang, as well as part of that interface with the heritage, and noting that council's heritage expert has supported the proposal.
Thank you. Any further questions?
May I ask a question? Yeah, I have a question about the hall. Again, I totally support building the disability ramp and all the access through the hall into the church. That's very good. However, the second floor, or depending how you see it, so ground floor, then that will be the first floor, doesn't actually serve that purpose, but mainly to accommodate an increasing number of community events. Is that so?
What's happening here is by introducing the ramping spaces at the lower level, we're displacing the existing offices and the toilets that need to also be have disabled access. So they're being pushed up by the fact that the moves that we're making at the lower level. This project is about providing spaces for the existing community that meets on site as part of St Luke's, to have contemporary spaces that meet expectations, all the things churches have to do with, like child safety and all of those other important considerations of the broader function of the church. The way that they were presented by objectors as commercial spaces is not true. You know, the meeting room, it was suggested it accommodates 70 people. It's actually got it could accommodate about 25 people. And that's for all the things that happen in the church, like Bible study groups or you know, youth groups getting together. They're the kind of functions that they want to be able to provide the right facilities for today's expectations.
Right, so has the number of community events been increasing in the last decades that your church organise or let other people use the space for?
Well, thank you. Could you repeat the question?
So has the number of community events, because we are not talking about commercial activities, right? Because that's not why you're building that additional to the community hall. You are putting the emphasis on an increasing number of community events that would take place in this building, either by the church itself or by other groups that you allow to have the to hold their community events in this community building for. So my question is, based on your record, we don't count the COVID 3 years, but in the last few decades, since the building since this community hall has been existing since the 60s, has the number of activities been increasing all this time? I mean, do you have much more to do? Do you have many more community events to host now than say before? That's why you justify the need of building another floor? Or is it just thinking that maybe in the future that can be used as well?
Oh, thank you. So to create the foyer space, we're displacing a church office, and so we're trying to find a place for church staff to be able to have as an office and for church groups to be able to meet. There have been groups meeting since the 1920s. The plays and concerts and other people have been using the church hall as a community space for decades. In fact, I checked with the previous minister who was around in 1984, and the community activities have been happening. None of them are commercial, and really our hope is that there's enough that our church activities have suitable spaces to meet. One of the things that happens in churches is people have a cup of tea before a church service, and then there might be a kids program that happens for Sunday school where there are breakout spaces for our Sunday morning kids activities. And so we hope that there is still space by the time we reduce the size of the hall and displace the church office, that there'll still be space for those kinds of church activities to happen. And we would hope that there would be some opportunity for other community groups to use the hall under the conditions suggested by council in the consent conditions, because we hope to share some space with other community groups, as has happened for 20, 30, 40 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question.
So I'm just having a look through your plan of management where you've got some complaints register and emergency contacting neighbours if you're having a large event. I guess I'm asking, given there seems to be a bit of a disjuncture between either what's happening or what's understood to be happening and perhaps some issues raised by neighbours, to what degree they're linked to your church or people going to and from the school or the park or the overlap, I'm not sure. But are you open to having more of a coordinated community liaison forum so that people who do live in the area can communicate with you in some established way every quarter or something, so you can try and proactively respond to any reasonable concerns of neighbours rather than maintaining a complaints register and telling people when you're having a big event? Are you open to that?
Oh, thank you. Yes, my phone number's on the website and we're always happy to talk to our neighbours. I might reiterate that I've spoken with many of our neighbours. I made sure that our adjacent neighbours were made aware of the DA before it happened. And there has never been a complaint about our activities brought to me until this DA kind of was released and some things have bubbled up. We're happy to hear concerns of our neighbours and to be a good neighbour. Of course we are.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just wondering whether it's worthwhile reaching out to neighbours and saying, look, we're happy to host a hours meeting once every quarter or something, and people can either bring things up as they happen or leave it to that to try and say, look, maybe this could be done differently or better, or these are our concerns. Are you open to that, or you just leave it to, I'm available at any time, pick up the phone and call me? I guess I'm just sort of trying to tease that out.
Oh, thank you. I'm open to some regular consultation as well, if that's helpful to our community.
Right, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend. Can I just say that, yes, we are aware of the concerns you've raised about conditions, and we've had some feedback from council officers. I'm not sure whether that feedback's been provided to you.
No, we haven't. We're not aware, other than that they've been passed on.
Okay. I will arrange, actually, if I can, to get that sent on so that you're aware of, as you've said, some of the conditions, some of the changes you've requested, they've agreed to, some they haven't. So I might see if I can get that to you so you can perhaps give us some further feedback, memo or whatever. But failing that, in the event the panel decides to grant consent, will be an opportunity. There's an ongoing dispute about some of the conditions to perhaps have that reviewed. So, I don't think we can take it any further at this point.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Thank you for that. The final speaker on the item is Miss Alicia Wells. Ms. Wells, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is...
Remind you about political donations.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Alicia Wells, and I have not provided any donations or to any political groups or candidates. And I just want to start by thanking you for the opportunity to address this panel. So I'm a church member and a community member who uses this space regularly. In terms of employment, I'm a senior director at ResMed, a medical device company that designs and develops ventilators, sleep apnea devices, software as a solution to patients with sleep apnea, COPD, asthma, ALS, neuromuscular issues, and many other conditions. And I work leading their system and architecture team who design and develop the products that treat these conditions. But I'll talk about why this is relevant later on. So my husband and I have 3 children who for many years have been attending events in this space. And 3 years ago, sadly, our youngest child, Kinsley, was diagnosed with global developmental delay. So she has significant mobility issues and many cognitive challenges. So this space holds such a beautiful community, both at the church and at the community play group, and they really have supported us through this journey. However, as everyone's already pointed out, this building is just not fit for purpose for anyone with any mobility issues, and so we are in desperate need of ramps and accessible toilets. All the research shows that people with disabilities are served best when they're truly part of wider communities rather than having to only meet and play with other people with disabilities in purpose-made facilities. And the change to this building will facilitate and enable inclusion across a spectrum of people with different abilities and different needs. Matt and I so appreciate the people of this community and that they've been willing to pledge their own personal money to update the church building so that our beautiful little girl can be much more easily participating in this community. So at work, we have a team dedicated to increasing inclusivity of our products, and their mantra is design for the one and benefit the many. This building project is such a great demonstration of this principle. By designing for the little Kinsleys of this world, parents with prams and older people who struggle with stairs and many others will benefit. I would like to advocate for those who struggle to have a voice of their own, a group that is already a part of this lovely community and who want to continue to be part of it. And so I want to recommend this and support this proposal to the panel.
Thank you. Certainly take that on board. Any questions, panel members at this stage? I think we all understand the point you're making. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the chance to make it.
That pretty much concludes that item. Are we able to send on the comments on the conditions to, I'm not sure whether they're meeting the architect or whatever, and see if we can get some feedback on that shortly. So thank you all for your presentation on that. We'll now move to the second item, which is a modification application for 5 Ahern Avenue, South Coogee. Again, the assessment report recommends the panel conditionally approve the application. And again, we have 4 people registered to address the panel on the item. The first is Mr. Damien Vella of Mr. Vella, if you're there, can I again remind you to indicate whether you've made any political donations? Say your name for the record.
Sure. Thanks very much. My name is Damien Vella. I hope you can hear me okay. And no, I have not made any political donations in my life. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to raise 3 kind of concerns. I've got my submission is pretty detailed, and I'm sure you've had a chance to look at that. 3 items were really about overall height. Second is landscaping, and third is the cabana scale. So firstly, in terms of height, obviously there's a very generous 9.5 metre height limit that's outlined in the DCP. And I do request the panel to carefully consider the long-term precedent of an approval, despite strong objection, of this important planning control will set. Now, I understand that when an exceedance is proposed and impacted parties have reached an agreement that this exceedance is acceptable, this provides a pathway to planning approval. In this case, the majority of neighbours to this proposal are impacted by the height exceedance. They're objecting to the height exceedance, and in my case, have not been consulted on the modification. It is very important to me that the planning controls are regulated and implemented by planning decisions. I do note that view loss assessment has been carried out. In my view, it's incomplete and contrary to the commitments made by the architect attending my residence when the application or the further assessment was made. I ask that even despite the view loss impacts being relatively small, they're not negligible as described by the assessment officer, and they are important to us. It's the basis on which we all live in this area, and respect for those planning controls are really, really important to us. So I would please ask the panel to consider the significant precedent that this would set despite strong objection, that a height exceedance of almost a metre is acceptable. I would also just note my objection to some of the justifications that have been made to this height exceedance, including the need to accommodate a lift overrun. And of course, the panel would understand that there's many solutions to architectural design challenges, and that to me does not provide a reasonable justification for exceedances to the DCP. Second item I was just hoping to touch on is landscaping. I do request that the panel carefully review the calculations of deep planting zones that have been supplied by the application. If you exclude the planting, grasses, etc., over slabs, I do struggle to see how it will achieve the 25% deep planting zone compliance. Further, the majority of the deep planting zones that contribute to whatever that area is are impacted by a sewer running on the northern boundary, which means that those zones can't actually be used for planting trees. And I view that means that they should be excluded from the calculations. The objective of the DCP control is to provide privacy screening between dwellings, and this proposal simply does not provide any screening using canopy trees as one frangipani tree in the front of the dwelling. It's also important well, I'll summarise by saying I strongly object, I guess, to the exclusion of canopy trees to the rear yard, particularly given the objectives of the DCP are to provide, screening between residences. Finally, I do object to the height of the cabana structure. It clearly does not comply with the written and intended planning controls, with maximum wall heights of 2.4 metres and a pitch height of 3.6 metres. The space is clearly visible from our rear yard and adds to already, excessive and very large structure on that site. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Seems not. No, but we did have the benefit of going out to the site, so we understand the relationship to your property. And thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. John Cornwall. Mr. Cornwall, are you there?
Yes. Can you see me?
Please proceed.
Yes. Thank you for allowing me to speak. We're at 23 Cairo Street. We're directly to the north of Fife Ahern. I'd like to just say that the DA was started for this property in 2008, and we worked with the neighbours on that and the council, and our concern is overlook and loss of privacy. And we came to an arrangement that there'd be louvers in place going from the floor to the ceiling, evenly spaced, and they'd be angled to prevent overlook and loss of privacy. In 2015, there was some new owners, and the same condition was put in place. These are the third set of owners in this same property. And the proposal for them is to not have any louvers and was to look right across us and look down into our yard. We'd lose loss of privacy in the use of our privacy in our yard, our deck. It looked directly into my daughter's bedroom and into our bathroom. So we proposed louvers, and there's been a lot of going back and forward and a lot of the iterations of the plan. I'm not really clear where it's at, but from what I can see, there's louvers on the southern side, which provides privacy to the people to the south, but on the northern side, from what I can gather from the latest documents, there's on page 120, 130, there's louvers on the first floor, but there's partial louvers on the ground floor. I'm requesting that we have louvers going from floor to ceiling to give us privacy. It is louvers to only 1.6 metres, which is what's in the last planning documents. We'll still have overlook by somebody taller than 1.6 metres, which I believe the applicant is. We're looking straight into my daughter's bedroom and into our bathroom. We'll also have night light spill of an evening, and we'll have noise and movement year round, especially if the balconies are now going to be enclosed to the street. And yeah, we're keen star watchers. We're going to lose, I like to be out back with the kids. We're going to lose the use of that. Yeah, so we also planted native trees to try and screen the property, but with the massive scope and size of the building, we're going to have the wind will be directed, and they get salt spray, and potentially the leaves will come off the trees. So my request is pretty simple. We want our privacy respected, which is a DCP objective, and we don't want to be looked down upon from the neighbouring property. So I request the same treatment as the southern side and what was in the 2008 and 2015 DAs, which is full louvers from floor to ceiling and to maintain our privacy. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Cornwall. Any questions? I'm sure we understand the point you're making, and as I said, we have been to the site, so we understand the relationship between properties, so thank you for that. The next speaker is the owner, Mr. Simon Ilkin. Mr. Ilkin, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me there?
We can hear you, thank you.
Hi, how are you going? Simon Ilkin, Alison Ilkin. We are the owners of Five Ahern with our 3 children. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the panel today. We would like to express our strong support to endorse the Council's recommendation for approval. As owners, we've faced significant financial and emotional challenges, which unfortunately have been fueled by many complaints, which we've not had the opportunity to address until today. So, these complaints have unfortunately led to council inspections, certifiers inspections, which have been baseless, and we've been found to have no wrongdoing at all. Led to animosity, unfortunately, with neighbours, and a halting and slowing of the build as well. So I do appreciate the opportunity to have a chat today. As seen in the report, the modifications to the approvals predominantly have been driven by compliance requirements. As mentioned before, we do have a Sydney Water asset on the northern boundary, which was incorrectly marked by Sydney Water, which is the reason that we've had a lot of these changes. We have to work within their zones of influence, and I'm not an architect, nor do I pretend to know a lot about it, but we are dictated by certain assets which were literally 10 times shallower than they were reported to be, and that moved certain structures. We also, I know you've been out there today, you would have seen how steep the site is. So there presents a lot of engineering and shoring challenges, and that's part of why this modification's been changed as well. And the other changes are fueled by buildability and also livability. We've lived in the property for several years now. And as you would see, as you walk along the coast, many properties have retrospectively enclosed their balconies because it is a really harsh environment. If you've ever seen any of the storms there, I always say the water comes up the road rather than down. And that is something that we found by living there. The storms are absolutely crazy, and you would see a lot of other people don't use their balconies, or they enclose them because it is a lovely area, and we want to live there forever. And so that was one of the reasons I would ask the panel to reconsider the condition 6.3.6, which is the enclosure of that top balcony. We previously had approval for operable glazing to enclose that as well. We wanted a balcony, but we wanted the ability to open and enclose the entire area as we could. And we approached tier 1 contractors who work on, for the glazing contractors who work on skyscrapers and things like that. And they basically said that nobody could guarantee any waterproofing for that balcony. And I guess, in the report, arguments can be made that the adjoining neighbours only have one of their 2 balconies that are enclosed, and I would see that as not necessarily valid points, because number 3 would have one enclosed and the other is a Juliet-style balcony, predominantly enclosed. Number 4 has one of their balconies enclosed, and the other one, which is unused, leaks. So it's not used because of those sort of harsh conditions. I think that having that top floor balcony enclosed presents no view loss to anyone. It doesn't create any privacy issues, and we've heard from our neighbours their concerns with privacy. And I would point out that we are the lowest lying property apart from 23, and most of these people do look down into our property more than anything else. And by enclosing that balcony as well, there'd be no solar impact either. So I would ask for a common sense approach to that condition. It's not fair to now remove what was previously sort of approved enclosure. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the panel for their time. Strongly support the recommendation for approval. I hope that the panel carefully considers the merits of our application, the context of the build, and some of the unjust obstacles we've had to face in this application. The project is currently on hold as we await this decision. It's significant to note that this application was lodged in October of 2022, and multiple notification periods have been served for unchanged plans. But we still await an answer on these relatively minor changes. But I trust the expertise of the panel will lead to a fast and fair outcome to alleviate the financial and burden and construction to recommence, so we can move back home. That's what we'd like.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Your architect, I believe, is also listed to speak next, so perhaps we might hear from him and then take questions from the panel to.
Sounds fair.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Speak up a little bit if you wouldn't mind. And again,
I said good afternoon, members of the committee, and I thank you for your time and appreciate you taking the opportunity to go through the plans. I guess the best way to do this, if I may.
Sorry, can I just ask you to say your name for the record and confirm the political donations bit?
My name is Huss Chalish of Pinnacle Design Studio. I'm the principal consultant here. and I have not made any political donations. However, I do have a conflict of interest with council, hence the reason this application has gone to a planning panel meeting.
And an independent assessment report wasn't done by council staff.
Correct. The consultant planner, Miss Ross Reed from Urban Perspectives, was the one who prepared the report and recommended it for approval. Because of my conflict with council, and the nature of my conflict is I do design work for members and staff at council. As such, it goes to a consultant planner whenever we put an application for it.
Thank you. So please proceed.
I guess the best way to address the panel, if I may, is to share the screen and maybe take questions as we go, if you like. Would that be acceptable to the panel?
No, I'm happy for you to make a presentation, then we'll take questions if needed.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm just going to ask to share the screen. And can we share the screen?
Yes, we can.
The first one is I'd like to show you the view loss, and that is from the home of Mr. Vella, the first registered public speaker. And it's worth noting that this is across
Sorry,
his.
Huss, that's not 19 Cairo.
That's 17, is it? 17, sorry, 17. My apologies, 17, not confusing. This is from 17 Cairo, and it's very that you can see where the approval is as such. And there's another balcony in the top left-hand corner. Our next view loss assessment was from number 19 Cairo. Here it is. And you can see the green outline marks the volume of what's proposed. And in the right-hand corner behind the trampoline and behind the pizza oven, you can actually see the small piles of where the cabana is. So the cabana is, well, let's call that the shoring walls for the cabana, but that would be the extent of the cabana as such. The increase in height is 885 millimeters in total. However, the increase in height is not for the entire building as such. An axonometry blanket for your perusal is here, and you can see where the actual breaches in height are, and they're right at the primary street facade, right at the start, which is a setback more than 12 meters from the street face, and it's a small section of the roof. The majority of the building, especially the cabana at the rear, doesn't even pop out. You can see it there and sets well within the adjoining properties. And as the owner, Simon Ilkin, rightly said, most of the properties that adjoin this property, I think there's 5 or 6 in total, actually look down into the subject property. We have no overlooking issues. And Ms. Rosreed from Urban Perspective has conditioned a number of privacy screens both on the north and south facade to address these issues. The neighbour at number 4, Ahern, has the swimming pool right adjoining our property at the top left-hand corner of the property. You can see that section there. And again, I cannot reiterate, this condition regarding the shoring and piling was a condition of the previous consent. Due to the sloping site and topography of this, we had to do hand piling on the shoring along the boundary to retain the neighbouring properties. The reason we got to this height was the condition of consent. And as you can see, we worked tirelessly with our neighbour at number 4 to achieve a height that was acceptable to him, which doesn't impact his views at all. He's put a glass panel and you can see we're right there. Is that clear as such? So that's it there. Number 23 Cairo Street originally had this type of garden, and you will see that this was his garden there, and there was screening trees which prevented any overlooking concerns into his daughter's bedroom, as he's just mentioned, and there was a 1.8 metre high fence that separated the two properties, and there was some canopy trees there. He obtained the CDC approval. However, the works in the CDC approval was to retain the trees along the boundary between my neighbour's property and his property at number 23. Unfortunately, this was not adhered to, He
No,
demolished
that's
all-
not true. That is not true, sir. That is not true. I don't know where you got that information.
Sorry, can I ask you not to interrupt? Interject with, hear what you're saying?
The trees were there in the photo to your left prior to commencement. The CDC plans were here and they retained some canopy trees along the boundary. The trees were removed and the actual height of the fence is no longer legible because you got planter boxes raised to where the height was. So their planter boxes are now at the 1 metre high dividing fence. Nonetheless, working tirelessly with the consultant planner, Miss Ros Reid, we came to a number of onerous conditions, particularly regarding privacy concerns along the northern facade. And you can see that there's a dotted line where the fence is there, which more than covers any type of concerns and is greatly higher than 1.8 metres from the existing ground level. So the northern pathway along the building is well protected between the neighbours. The screens are reinstated, and in this modification, my clients have requested the windows along the northern side be removed, which Miss Ros Reid has accepted, and added some other conditions by way of privacy screening along the southern facade and along the back. And in terms of landscaping, the cabana roof, which I think is a fantastic idea, has been reinstated, and that provides another level of greenery. Building area calculations, it's worth noting, members of the panel, that the previous modification had a larger FSR, and by way of condition, the FSR is actually reduced, but we have not requested any external or any greater footprint by increasing or decreasing the setbacks from the street or side boundaries or the rear boundaries. We are working totally within the approved building volume, and a lot of the changes actually were driven by compliance. The first one being the basement, which is all subterranean and is completely enclosed below ground. The structural engineer provided a letter of support, and the structural plans were stamped and endorsed by the certifier, and as such were built in accordance with the CC drawings, which had been stamped and certified. The second one I referred to was the piering at the back. This was a condition of consent, number 37 and 36, where we had to retain the existing boundaries, existing neighbouring lots which were adjoining our boundaries. And the third one, which at great expense to my client, and it was an error by the water service coordinator, whereby the basement, the sewer is plotted along there, and where the basement was originally, the lift location was within the zone of influence. As such, it had to be shifted slightly east. But again, that was contained solely within the approved building footprint. Members of the panel, that concludes my presentation. If you would like to ask me any questions, I'm happy to take them.
So thank you for that. Panel members, do you have any questions of either Mr. Ilkin or Jacob?
I just want to understand what your position is. So look, I've read the report, I've read the structural engineer's report, and I think the essence of your position is that due to both shoring the rear wall, changes to a neighbouring property, then on-site issues both with that retaining wall and some Sydney water assets, things needed to change that affected the height, which is understandable. I guess what I'm hearing from you, and I just want to make sure I'm right, is that you're okay with all the recommended conditions with the exception of the one that requires the opening up of an enclosed balcony. And my reading of that from the recommendation of the independent planner is for two reasons: that they, despite what you've said about FSR going down, say the FSR is increasing by 8 square metres, and that by reinstating an open balcony, that'll help with the facade articulation. So am I right in saying that's your one issue with the recommendation?
That is the issue my clients have with the one recommendation, right, the non-approval of the first floor enclosure. Yes, in summary.
Okay,
yes.
Thanks. And what's your rationale for that being an unreasonable condition, and what you're proposing being more reasonable?
the rationale behind that, having had the benefit or non-benefit of living there in such period of time, that space would become non-usable. Now, in the previous modification, we had the glazing being operable by way of a bifold system. So it could be used as a balcony and set back. Can you see my hand movement? Sorry, I'll talk with my hands. And then it also had a track which followed the nice gentle nature and curve of the balcony. So lack of a better room, let's call it a sunroom. So you had the option of the track being a balcony and then had the track following that, which would have enclosed it anyway. When we took it out to tender and buildability, we engaged several companies. The biggest one we got to was Mycos Facades. Now, Mycos Facades has been in business for 60 years, does Fraser's Group, does Lend-Lease, and Con Mycos is a dear friend of mine, and he looked at this program. And we also went to Vitroska, and they do buildings 60 stories and over. And they would not guarantee that this would not leak over time. It would not work in a way where it could act as a balcony and act as a sunroom. So it could do what the previous modification was approved to be, act as a balcony and come back and come as a sunroom. It was just not achievable. Now, instead of retrospectively trying it or doing it, my client's instructions were to close the balcony in one swoop and to pick up all the buildability issues that were compliance related in a 455 modification. So the set of plans that you see before you, hopefully, if approved, will be the as-built plans. Now,
and your response to that concern about the facade articulation and the softening of the facade, what's your response to that?
I feel like the facade articulation is articulated by way of the concrete band, how it steps down and draws your eye away from the glazing unit. And then the second floor at the back is very well stepped back. And there is a counterleaving element over we call it the ground floor and the first floor, which goes over the recessed garages as such. So that gives you, your eye starts to read that as a volume, and the bottom one is so far recessed. And at this point in time, it is concrete, but we are going to be cladding it, and then it'll be subterranean once we build the landscaping around it. That will provide the articulation that we envisage in part of the design. Now, it's worth noting, Miss Reid also spoke about increasing the fenestration and adding some more operable windows too, which I happen to agree with. So that'll also soften the facade, especially on the northeastern corners.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions?
I've got one question about the removal of the windows on the northern elevation, which I assume was to address the privacy issues, but it does actually have impacts on amenity issues for the house.
Do you mind if I share my screen again and show you the removal of the windows and where they were driven? Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
The two large windows here were the original location of the elevator. Hence the reason that the lift now was removed and got shifted slightly east. There was no longer a need to have a glazing unit for the elevator. And it's actually better because there is no more light spill towards the neighbour as such, with that glazing unit removed from the lift shaft, so to speak. The two windows at the top, were for the bathroom, which is here on the top floor, the master ensuite. That window still achieves ventilation there. We just shifted it to the west. The bathroom, the shower was relocated to the north, and there's an operable skylight in lieu of the windows facing the neighbours. And then there's a sliding door to the recessed top floor at the top, which also provides ventilation to the top floor, a living space and a bedroom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions? Okay, thank you, everybody, for your...
Committee members, thank you for your time. I appreciate you taking the time to look at the application.
Thank you. We will discuss the matter subsequently. So, the panel's now going to consider the matter of 7 Inman Street, as I indicated before. Jason has declared a conflict in this one, and so he will leave us now. Once he does, we have one registered speaker, objector, Rosalie Degabriel. I'm sorry.
Degabriel, yes.
The assessment report in this matter recommends that the panel refuse the application and notes that the matter is already the subject of an appeal to the New South Wales Land and Environment Court. So that's just the background. That's the recommendation before us.
Okay.
Ms. Degabriel, please proceed, but if you can just explain, again, for the record, give your name and
sure.
confirm you haven't made any donations.
Okay, sorry, it's Rosalie de Gabriel. I am the direct neighbour to the north of number 7. And look, I'm just here for support. I do realise council has already refused the application, but we have had a very difficult time. I have had a very difficult time with the people at number 7, and so I really want to make sure it's a belt and braces approach. Can I just share my screen? Let me see. Is there a button to share the screen? Sorry? Oh, sorry. I'm just looking to share the screen.
You just tell them.
Oh,
Sorry, how do I do that?
Top right
hand corner.
Top right. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. No. You're not getting the right ones. Okay, let me see if I can get the one I want. Are you now getting some photos?
No.
No, not yet.
We have had the benefit of an inspection of the site this morning. We've been out there.
Oh, have you? Okay.
We understand the circumstances and you've explained you're the neighbour adjoining, so.
Oh, okay. Look, yeah, look, you haven't seen my rear yard, which is what the photos do show you, but it's really, and I just don't know why it won't show you that when it shows you my other screen. Hang on, I'll just try one more time if I could just have your patience. Oh, hang on. Yes, sorry, I just did have it then, sorry. I'm not used to using this software. I use other softwares. Share. Okay, I think it's sharing now.
We're not seeing it yet.
You're not seeing it. Okay, all right. Look, I mean, if you've been to the site, you've noticed the extreme overlooking. I mean, obviously the proposal is in direct contravention of the council DCP. It creates enormous angst for me. It's been a nightmare period. It's a very big problem. You would have seen from the street, from my bedrooms at the front, my kitchen and bathroom, and the bigger problem is in the rear, which you obviously didn't see. You would have been welcome to come in. It looks directly into my rear yard. I have, and they have imposed on me in a previous application that the maximum height of trees. So I've got a real problem. I mean, you might say to me, put trees there, but the council have put a height limit on the trees, so I can't create privacy in that way. I have a disability from a serious injury a few years ago. I need the spa. I do not want people standing on the roof looking at me in my disabled state. Yeah, it's a real, it's just a terrible thing. But look, I won't labour you too much. I've sat through all the meetings. And I didn't realise that the committee had been here, but it is a problem. Extreme loss of amenity to my property is the major concern, and obviously I really advocate the council decision, which is to refuse and to move forward. So yeah, look, I won't labour your time. I don't know if anyone wants to discuss any of the other points. It's unlikely that you would advise against council advice. Yep. And I'm sorry,
that's for the panel. That's for the panel. Can I ask whether there's any questions at this stage of?
No.
Well, I'm sure we understand the point you're making.
Yeah.
The council hasn't refused it. They've recommended it to the panel that the panel refuse it. So it's a matter we'll deal with shortly.
Oh, okay. So look, well, in that case, then, yeah, look, I just wanted, then let me quickly highlight some of the last points that I have here, that the terrace that they're proposing is extremely large. It's about 3/4 the size of the entire roof area. They're also proposing a lift from the basement to the roof area, which suggests that it will be used with frequency and also with furniture, noise-making equipment and large gatherings of people, which is a major concern, particularly with the lift. So we're not talking about a viewing platform here. This is a permanent roof structure with a lift from the basement. It's extremely large. I won't put an exact size on it because I can't measure it, but it is about 3/4 of the entire roof area. And given each level of this building is about 100 square metres, I'll leave that for you to work out. The amenity to my bedrooms and everything on the south side is very terrible, both with acoustic and light, and visual privacy is a major issue here. My family will not be able to enjoy their bedrooms, the study, the kitchen, the bathrooms, all of those will be impacted to direct overlooking. My spa area, as I said, is a major issue. I am disabled due to an injury a few years ago. I need my spa area. It's a therapeutic spa. I have a lot of metal implanted in my body. Long story, you probably don't want to go there, but the spa is essential for me. And what I certainly don't want is people up there staring at me, and it's not a pleasant sight. The property as it is has enormous views as it is. So this is a duplication. They have views from the front of the property and from the back of the property. Yeah, they've got 2 levels of views, both front and rear. So they already have significant view sharing and views allocated to them. So to give them, it's not necessary to create yet another very massive platform, which is going to impact my property visually and acoustically, not to mention the light that will come from such a large terrace. And just to point out that the structure they have up there currently, it doesn't really represent the true bulk of what they're asking for. And the other major issue we've had with this particular property is it's a creeping DA. Yeah, we started with one and it's gotten larger and it's gotten larger. And no doubt once this comes through, there will be a larger one. Not only that, but a number of the neighbours have also indicated that they would possibly be interested if this was approved. So that is a real concern that a precedent could be actually created here. And I think that needs to be taken into account. So look, I think that really covers all my points. It's in contravention of the DCP. It's really annoying that we have to spend time and money when we have a DCP, and you have to ask, why do we have a DCP if people can create this sort of tension around something that's already covered by the DCP? And we get this on a regular basis, and that needs to be considered both by council and the planning committee. Okay.
Thank you. And there are no questions, I think. So that concludes that item, and indeed concludes the public section of our meeting. So we've heard from all the registered speakers, and I thank them all, as that remain, for their assistance. In accordance with the panel's guidelines, we will now close the public meeting and we'll move to a closed meeting to deliberate and vote on these matters. The outcome from voting and determination will be made available through the council's website, either late tonight or tomorrow, and a recording of the public meeting will also be on the council's website. I also want to place on the record our thanks to the council staff for their assistance so far with today's meeting. Now declare the meeting closed, the time being 2:25 p.m. Thank you all.